Viewers, it was a mid-air scare for passengers on board SpiceJet flight SG-1080 from Goa to Pune as a window frame was found dislodged. This has triggered a bit of panic amongst residents on board, but the airline has now confirmed in their statement that this was a non-structural trim component and hence did not compromise on the safety or integrity of the aircraft in any way. The cabin pressurization remained normal throughout the flight and there was no impact on passenger safety. The video that you see on your screens has been widely circulated on social media. While Times Now is not vouching for the authenticity, it's a video that's reportedly from the same plane showing you how the window frame was dislodged and triggered panic amongst flyers. Let's quickly get in Sabyasachi on this. Sabyasachi, it is of course in these times when aviation safety is something that's much discussed. The picture in itself looks pretty scary, but the airline says there's nothing much to worry about. What are the sources in DGCA telling you about this incident?
Well, that's right. See, the picture that has been shared in social media is scary, and that has spread panic among the passengers of the SpiceJet who were present inside the flight. And now, several of the passengers have come out in front and said that this was a scary situation for them. Now, a detailed statement has come out from SpiceJet where they said that there was no depressurization inside the aircraft. In fact, the safety of the passengers were not compromised, and immediately after landing, the problem had been fixed by the airlines. Now, the question which raises is regarding the safety of the passengers, and that is the reason why the DGCA is carrying out a detailed audit of every single airlines which are operating in the country, and one by one these problems are being addressed. Now, meanwhile, on the coming week on 9th itself, the Parliamentary Committee has summoned all the operators of all the airlines operators across the country, and all these problems would be addressed. Now, time and again we are seeing that people who have been flying different airlines like Indigo, Akasa or SpiceJet or Air India have been continuously raising their concerns, and this has been continuously increasing. Now, these concerns will be addressed, and these concerns will also be raised by the Parliamentary Committee towards the airline operators who will be part of this meeting. Now, strict guidelines has been instructed to all the airline operators.
Sabyasachi, of course, this is very significant, but we are going to once again put our focus on the probe as far as the AI-171 crash is concerned. There are fresh clues that are emerging in the case. Thanks so much for joining us, Sabyasachi. Now, all of these clues that are emerging in the crash of AI-171 seem to rule out many of the possible causes of the crash and narrow the focus of the probe. There are multiple angles that are being discussed after the crash. While experts have weighed in on the possibility of misconfigured flaps, bird strike, and how the extended landing gear may have caused and impeded the lift as well as affected the flight during takeoff, top sources are telling Times Now that this flight simulation that was conducted by Air India, replicating the Boeing 787's configuration as the ill-fated aircraft took off during this particular flight. The findings have put the focus back on the dual engine failure theory, and let's tell you why. The first revelation is that the flight control settings may not be primarily the cause as far as the crash is concerned. The second revelation coming out of it is that the landing gear and flap positions did not impact on the flight itself. The third revelation is that a technical malfunction most likely caused the lack of lift or the loss of lift in this particular case. The fourth revelation is that there's simultaneous loss of power now, which is under focus. The last and the most significant is that the RAT deployment supports the dual engine failure theory. This is as far as what's being looked at. So why exactly could have the engines made by GE, one of the most experienced engine manufacturers in the world, fail midair? Did an electrical fault lead to a dual engine failure? Did engine control system failure cause the crash? That's another question that emerges. Was there fuel contamination which led to the loss of thrust? So these are some of the theories that have been spoken about. Let's take this across to our guest now. Joining us, we have Captain Ehsan Khalid, the ex-airline captain, as well as instructor and examiner and a veteran IF pilot. We have Captain Amit Singh, aviation expert and founder of Safety Matters Foundation. Alistair Rosenshine is a former pilot of the Boeing 747 and aviation consultant. Sean Bell, former RF fighter pilot and aviation expert, joins us on the show as well. Let me start with you first, Captain Ehsan. And what do you make of these reports that have come out as far as the simulation is concerned? How much credence can we give to this kind of a report that has been carried out by the airline?
Hi, good evening, Madhav. As I said previously also, no fault on the part of the captain or co-pilot could have actually been able to deploy the RAT. The fact remains that they simulated and they found that there was a wrong, even in the case of wrong configuration of flaps and landing gear, the aircraft would have continued to take off and would not have met with this kind of accident. So my submission is that, dual engine failure on this aircraft or any aircraft is rare, but it happened in 2019 on 2 occasions. One was dismissed as contamination of fuel. The other was a problem of thrust control malfunction adjustment system. This is the third one. If there be found something that the engines failed, which is 99% the chances that both the engines failed, and they failed because of a computer signal. And that computer signal could have come from the electrical failure. If that happens then I think Boeing has to reopen the investigation on the other 2 dual engine failures also that happened in 2019. And this particular simulation that was done, further says that, incidents of pilot error, incidents of bird strike, incidents of fuel contamination is totally out of the window.
Right.
No fuel contamination will cause both engines to fail at the same time. No bird hit can cause, no mechanical failure can cause 2 engines to fail at the same time.
Okay.
It has to be electrical that led to computer and the problem that happened.
All right, let me bring in Captain Alistair Rosenshine as well. What do you make of this, sir? Because, is it only a technical error, as Captain Ehsan is talking about? Have we completely ruled out any possibility of an error by the pilot, given the simulator's findings?
Well, when an investigation is being carried out, nothing is ruled out until they've analysed all the data and everything. But it does look increasingly less likely that it was a human error or pilot error, as you call it. What is more likely right now is that it was a dual engine failure, and this is an extremely rare thing to happen. Now, it did happen on a Boeing 777, the BA-38 in 2008, coming from Beijing to Heathrow, when both engines simultaneously shut down because the fuel lines froze. So that was it was caused by icing of the fuel. Now, obviously, it was not the case here because the temperature was very high. I believe it was 43 degrees Celsius was the temperature on the ground. So one can rule that out. But there is still the possibility of a vapor lock. Vapor lock is caused when the fuel heats up to such an extent that it actually vaporizes in the fuel pipes. And then the fuel pumps cavitate, are unable to supply fuel to both engines. And it is possible, of course extremely unlikely, but possible, that this caused the engines to fail. But as the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder have already been recovered, the investigators will, in very short order, know exactly what's happened. They probably won't reveal it to the public, that includes us, for another 2 or 3 months. But it is my contention that both engines failed.
Right. Let me bring in Sean Bell as well. Captain Bell, if we can look at what has been, some of the theories which have been put out in the public domain, there's also, this entire theory of a possible electrical failure that led to this kind of a dual engine shutdown. How much credence have you given to this theory that has been proposed in the public domain?
Yeah, it's good. Good afternoon to you all. I think one of the things I would first of all say is, as an ex-military guy, I didn't fly airlines, but the boards of inquiry, the inquiries that are done are very thorough. They have all the data, not only accident data recorders, but tapes and everything. So I'm always a bit wary about too much hypothesis here. What I would say, though, is that when you look at the video evidence that's there, the aircraft doesn't climb as steeply as it should have done. The flaps, there are some of the flaps down. Experts say the flaps and undercarriage do not appear to be part of it. The ram air turbine does appear to have been deployed. That only deploys when both of the engines fail for some reason. So I suspect they will be focusing on why that happened. What I was interested in is that the chances of a dual bird strike, which is some people have talked about. I've hit several birds in my military time. Luckily, they didn't take the engine out, but they did do some damage. It is worth remembering that Ahmedabad has a significant issue with bird strikes. I think there was a 107% increase in 2023 of the bird strikes before the previous year. And the chances of having both engines taken out are very slim.
But wouldn't a bird strike be visually, wouldn't it have, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you there, but wouldn't a bird strike have been visually, you know, wouldn't have left some amount of evidence in terms of smoke or in terms of some kind of, damage to the engine, visibly so?
Well, first of all, it would have done, but you have not seen the engines yet, and they've had to survive a crash. So the fact is they will be badly damaged. If you look at the video, just as the aircraft rotates, it's a bit of a swirl, whether it's a dust cloud or whatever, there is something there. And I would draw your attention to 2009, an Airbus A320 famously landed on the Hudson River because it managed to hit some birds, but it had an out. I think the Board of Inquiry will find out exactly what happened. It's very rare for these sorts of incidents and accidents to happen, but I still think there's quite a lot of options available. But the main focus, I agree with the previous guys, that when you see a ram air turbine come out, that signifies a dramatic loss of power. That means that both engines were probably not working, and that is coherent with the flight path of that aircraft. The question is, why did those engines stop? And that will be the focus, I suspect, of the Board of Inquiry.
Right, and Captain Amit Singh, I'm looking at this report that's coming from the New York Times, which suggests that yes, it is a dual engine failure, because if there was a single engine failure, the aircraft would have perhaps veered to one side, which doesn't seem to be happening as far as the videos that we have in the public domain which have been analyzed are concerned. Do you agree with that contention?
Well, let me begin with saying that an accident does not happen out of the blue. There are multiple reasons which at times may seem insignificant, if combined in a certain situation, may come to a situation wherein it becomes the cause of an accident. So we don't know the existing situation, existing faults in the aircraft, whether electrical faults or fuel related or flight control related. Seeing the video, we see the plume just before rotation. So there's a hut behind which the aircraft passes. That portion is obscured. I've just posted this morning a video of a 320 taking off. On the takeoff roll, there's an engine failure. So the big plume of dust or ash comes out from behind the engines, which is similar to what we see here. And on the 320 video, you will see that the landing gear is left down, probably because of distraction, and the rate of climb is pretty less. So the gradient is pretty low, which is kind of similar to what you see here. Now, looking at the rate of climb and the second video, we see if you can do a spectral analysis, the sound of the engines and of the fan blades is almost equivalent to an aircraft on approach, which means 50 to 60% of the thrust rather than 90%. So we can make out that the engine is running at low speed or close to idle. So that is the point where the second engine is developing less power or has failed. And if you look at the wreckage of the engine, I can see only wreckage of one engine, wherein we can see the turbine blades and the fan blades which are intact, which means that at point of impact, the engines were not rotating at high speed.
Right, but Captain Amit Singh, I'm just interrupting you there. If this theory were true, wouldn't the pilot have been able to abort the takeoff, or was he already airborne when this plume of smoke hits?
So at that point, he was beyond the decision speed. So we have a decision speed. If you're beyond that, it is not prudent to stop because you will not have enough runway to stop. So if there is some reason, whatever reason for an engine failure or an engine damage, if you can say, so the pilot is committed to take off. And single engine, as we know, the aircraft is capable of handling one engine, all sort of maneuvers, at least for 90 minutes. So this kind of, the second engine, why did the second engine fail, could be also because of the landing gear being left down. We don't know the weight of the aircraft, if the aircraft was loaded more than what was presented to the crew. So those are what the sabotage angle will look at.
Right.
And the criminality. So there could be multiple reasons. So an accident happens on a bad day when multiple reasons combine.
Right. But do you agree with that contention, Captain Ehsan? Because there's also, another third theory that is doing the rounds of a possible software crash that led to the double engine failure. How much credence do you give to that theory?
Well, the software malfunctioned. Why it malfunctioned will be a different story altogether. But definitely a software malfunction will be able to shut down the engine. I would like to draw the attention of three very experienced pilots out here. The Mayday call was Mayday, no thrust, losing power, unable to lift. All of us would actually understand that, Mayday, engine failure, Mayday, engine fire. But here the pilot is very clear, no thrust, losing power. So this is a very unusual kind of a Mayday call where the pilot has already declared no thrust. He's not saying one engine failure or something. If there was one engine failure, he would have actually told so. So coming back to the whole thing that, the engine failed to produce required amount of thrust. Was it 50% lost? Was it 40% lost? Was it full loss? Was it in the restart mode? That will be in DFTR. But definitely the aircraft doesn't go down like that with engines running. Whether the gear was down or the flaps was not in the right place, it would have still gone off pretty nicely. Maybe the margins would have been lesser. So we look at technical failure more.
All right, technical failure. In fact, this is a theory that has been put out, Captain Alistair, and you can come in on this in terms of the software glitch. Because, if it's a software glitch that can cause this kind of a crash, this is a serious cause of concern. How do we guard against this in the future?
Well, first of all, one has to establish that that was actually the cause of this accident. But it is entirely possible that software electrical failure could have shut down both engines because it requires electrical power to power the fuel pumps and the other services that keep the engine running. This is all speculation right now. We will find out the cause of this accident fairly soon because the two black boxes were recovered. It's not like MH370, which disappeared in the Indian Ocean. In this one, in this accident, they have both copy voice recorder and flight data recorder. And the data that they recovered from those two boxes it covers just about every system. And they're able to program the simulator with that data to recreate the flight. And they'll be able to see what thrust the engines were producing, where the thrust levers were, whether the fuel had been cut off manually or not. All these things are there. Now, with computer...
But Captain Alistair, I just want to ask a question from a layman's perspective. You're all veteran pilots. Where would this data come from to the airline? Does it go to Boeing? Is it transmitted to the airline? Where is this data and where are these parameters really loaded from?
Well, this will be the aircraft accident investigators. And so it'll be primarily an Indian team, but they will also involve engineers from General Electric, the Indian Aviation Authority. But it will be, this is a standard way of doing an accident investigation. So when those boxes are retrieved, they are decoded. Everything has been, all this data and all the parameters are recorded onto those two boxes. They will also hear what the two pilots were saying to each other. And as your veteran Indian Airlines pilot, Captain Ehsan, had said, that the captain reported a loss of thrust. And you have to attach a lot of importance to what he said. I mean, this is, it's a really serious point. And so it does really look like both engines failed. The question is why, how could it happen again to another aircraft, or was this a unique incident? As for the dust on rotation, I have noticed on aircraft rotating, as they do so, there's an extra downdraft from the wings, and it can cause dust on both sides of the runway or even on the runway surface to puff up and give the impression that something untoward has happened. It's very unlikely it was a bird strike, double bird strike, but it does very much look like they lost power on both engines at or very close to rotation.
Right. Sean Bell, you want to comment on that? Because there's video evidence, says Captain Amit, of at least one possible bird strike. We don't know if it's caused by a bird strike. Of course, Captain Alistair seems to suggest it can happen due to dust flying up at the moment of takeoff. What do you make of this?
Well, no, I mean, I agree entirely. I don't disagree. I think we're speculating here which is amusing, since there are a bunch of experts with all the data that are sifting through this. I think particularly for the families involved, I recall that there are 275 people that got killed as a result of this accident. They won't welcome me speculating on what might or might not have happened. What they will want is they will want a team of experts assisted by the NTSC, the Americans, and the British Air Accident Investigation Board, sifting through, looking at all the evidence, the black box, the tapes from the air traffic control tower, the pilot's logs, looking at their training and their simulators, making sure every aspect is covered, and they will come out with a very detailed log of what happened. And I think one of the things that I always look at is, I don't believe in coincidences. You know, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner is one of the most safe aircraft in the world so far. It was a composite aircraft. Over 1,100 aircraft have been produced. It's described as the best-selling wide-body aircraft ever. And therefore, if it is a double failure, that will be something that will certainly catch the attention of the Boeing team.
Many questions for Boeing and GE, if that's indeed the case, as you rightly put it. But before I quickly end, we have limited time. Captain Amit Singh, I want you to comment on this. Last week, we were on a debate, and we were talking about, ICAO and how they wanted to be part of this entire investigation. Rather unusual set of circumstances there. The government finally allowed those investigators. Do you believe that the Annex 13 schedule of a report within 1 month is going to be upheld now that ICAO investigators are part of the probe, although only as observers?
So ICAO has very clearly stated that normally they do not participate in any accident investigation unless the state requests. But here the concern is that ICAO is concerned that they should be a part of the investigation without the state request. So ICAO has put in a request, and if it is agreed, then they will be coming as observers. So the 30-day limit for a preliminary investigation, the idea is to get out facts as soon as possible so that the aircraft which are currently flying, if there is any anomaly or any immediate recommendation which needs to be given, must be given out. So it is not a 30-day period. Even if during your DFDR analysis at any point of time, if you find any such situation which is alarming, then it has to come out for all the operators. So that is why we were concerned that who is in charge of the investigation? Do we have a team? So currently we do not have a rated 787 pilot, and there is no airworthiness person in charge. And who's the investigator in charge? Nobody's been named.
Well, at least nothing out there in the public domain at the moment. These are valid concerns, but clearly, of course, it's for the AIB to put it out in the public domain and put out a report so that the families of those who have been affected by this terrible tragedy of a crash do find some amount of answers and some amount of closure in terms of what has transpired. Captain Ehsan, Captain Amit Singh, Captain Alistair and Captain Sean Bell, thank you so much for joining us with your perspectives this evening.